The following video is made possible by Audible. In February of 2010, 2K Games released Bioshock 2 and received some pretty positive reviews, except from one unfortunate demographic: gamers with color blindness. A hacking minigame requires you to mash a button when the needle's over a certain color. Hit it on green, you'll succeed. Hit it on the red, and you'll set off a terrible alarm. In the original game's version, the two colors were indistinguishable to many players with deuteranopia, more commonly known as red-green color blindness or just green blindness. In the days before Twitter, Tumblr, and Facebook, it was an independent gaming blog called, believe it or not, Negative Gamer that popularized this story with a list of photoshopped images simulating what this hacking minigame looks like to the colorblind. The story made the rounds across Kotaku, Engadget, Rock Paper Shotgun, and such, eventually to MTV News. And depending on which version you were playing, it would take about a year of technical difficulties and maybe a DLC purchase to fix the problem. There were a number of variables that caused this problem to blow up in 2010 in particular. The move to HD graphics means smaller text, busier screen spaces, more detailed and cluttered environments, all on flat panel HD displays that wash out colors and brighten blacks. Also consider the particular shades of red and green that the developers chose here. More oversaturated, contrasting shades would have been more visible to colorblind players. But 2 years before, in 2008, Left 4 Dead released with one of the first colorblind modes in memory. So it makes sense that 2010 is when it started to seem strange that a highly anticipated AAA sequel, the sequel to Bioshock, funded by Grand Theft Auto's publisher no less, released with the problem that 1 out of 10 of their playtesters should have been able to spot and report. Bioshock 2 was not the first game to have this problem, but it might have been the most popular one. Before Bioshock, there was a need to differentiate the blue and purple loot in Borderlands, the blue and purple blocks blending together in Puyo Puyo, diamonds and lapis looking almost exactly the same in Minecraft, bullets and weird indie Japanese shmups blending into the background, and the charging LEDs. Is this green or yellow? I don't actually know. It's the same problem in Puzzle Fighter between the green and the orange blocks, or are these dark yellow? I don't know either. Those are a few examples of games that have given me problems because I also have red-green color blindness. The severity depends on the individual, but for a handful of games, this does create a real delay in processing speed that creates a real handicap. Hopefully this footage of Puyo Puyo Tetris speaks for itself. I am a beast at one of those games and just cannot keep up the pace for the other one. So I can't do the Puyo Puyo part of Puyo Puyo Tetris well, but I'm apparently lucky enough to make out the colors in Bioshock 2's hacking minigame. This isn't a problem that's really affected me in many ways outside of the handful of games that require me to quickly pick blue from purple or bright green from yellow, but what's missing is a more, shapely identifiers, like if they had jagged edges with a unique texture, kinda like how Bejeweled does it. But it turns out that Puyo Puyo Tetris does have a colorblind mode of sorts, though it's more like a workaround. It's an upgrade shop that turns the blocks into shaped letters, but even then, the shapes are too bubbly and smooth to be instantly recognizable just at a glance. I still feel like I'm much slower at this than I'm supposed to be. The first thing everyone assumes about color blindness is that means you see in black and white. That's only true for like less than 1% of people. When you clarify that it's more about red-green color blindness, the thing 10% of men have, it's more like they're different shades of a fairly similar hue. I can tell these colors apart when the tiles are right next to each other side by side, but making that judgment across the whole stack when they're spread apart is nigh impossible. That's when I'm gonna start to slow down. Here's a comparison between what this supposedly looks like to normal people and what it looks like to me, but you know, both of them look exactly the same to me and I just gotta trust that I have the right one on the screen. Really though, it's not that bad. I'm sure I'm capable of living a long, happy, healthy, normal life without being able to play a handful of Match 4 puzzle games, but I like to ponder over the question of nature versus nurture when it comes to wondering why I never had a big interest in visual art or design. I don't know. I'm sure I've made some weird coloring choices on the channel sometimes, but hell, screw YouTube. Apparently you can be an accomplished game designer for 3 decades with so much color blindness that you're almost monochromatic. Fallout founder Tim Kaine made sure that the Outer Worlds could be played without the need to distinguish a whole lot of reds from greens or yellows or blues from purples. It's a common enough condition that there's actually a pretty respectable number of colorblind developers out there, and I managed to get the guy who did the GDC talk on it, Creative Assembly's Douglas Pennant. Hello, and thanks for having a chat. First of all, could you tell us who you are and what you do?
Okay, so my name is Douglas Pennant, and I am a development manager at Creative Assembly.
How did you first find out that you were colorblind?
I think some of my earliest memories of having color trouble was being at school, drawing pictures. So I would draw a picture of a whale in the sea, and the kids would ask me, like, Doug, why is the sea purple? And I would say,
it's dark blue. Come on.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah, I get the feeling you might have been through a similar thing.
Yeah, exactly. What other activities does Deuteranopia affect? Anything real serious or life-changing outside of games or coloring or recognizing blushes?
Although close to blushing, there was one which was kind of serious once, where I had someone in front of me who was kind of feeling a bit faint, but I couldn't see the blood draining out of his face.
Oh my god.
Yeah, he was going white as a sheet, and there was no distinction in my eyes. It was only until when someone else walked in, looked at him, took one look, and said, "Oh my god, I'm getting the nurse," that I realized, oh, something should be obvious, but it isn't.
The games in particular that were at the turning point of this awareness are Left 4 Dead and Battlefield 3 and Bioshock 2, then that's from 2008 to 2011. I'm wondering if the switch over to flat panel displays, which do infamously have less color information and brighter blacks, if that might be something you've heard of?
If I think about why I think we've noticed it more recently, I think it's because of the development and increase in the complexity of the games we play, both in terms of game mechanics, but also in terms of art. So I think of Unreal Tournament, for example. So the original Unreal Tournament was clear as day. Enemies were red, friendlies were blue. And the environments were basically brown or grey. The environments were really quite simple. They were as good as they could be at the time, but they were effectively limited to a very readable state, whereas now there are more opportunities for realism. So playing Unreal Tournament 3 now, if I do that, I sometimes have trouble distinguishing red players from the environment, because there is, in the simplest way, lots more art going on both the player and the environment.
You know, all this talk on bodily autonomy and bodily anomalies is getting me in the mood to rave about one of my favorite activities these days. Running on the treadmill, playing Tetris, zoning out while listening to an audiobook from our sponsor, Audible.com, where I recently finished listening to Homer's Odyssey, as read by Sir Ian McKellen. An entire career can be spent tracing how this 3,000-year-old epic influences modern pop culture, with video game tropes being a glaring descendant of Homeric heroism. And with Ian McKellen's voice, it's like having Gandalf read you an ancient book of lore, except all the world building you do here is real life. Sign up for a 30-day free trial at audible.com/superbunnyhop, or, this is new, text SuperBunnyHop to 500-500 for a mobile link. Each month you choose one audiobook plus 2 Audible originals. You can exchange any title at any time, and you keep your library forever, even if you cancel. So once again, that's audible.com/superbunnyhop for 1 free month. Thanks again, and let's get on with the show. I'm writing this in the late 2010s about a problem that became better known in the early 2010s. And despite the directions the industry has gone in over the past decade, despite the greed, the gambling, the crunch time, the tax dodging, and all the examples of immaturity and incompetence we constantly see, accessibility features feel like the sanctuary. Like they're at least one aspect of the industry that has been getting better over time. A generous wealth of accessibility options, stuff I would not have expected developers to let players get control over a decade ago, now seems to reliably be included in all the big blockbuster stuff. The highest reviewed, first-party, AAA exclusive stuff that has a QA department. If you go back and read some comments from those Bioshock 2 days about a decade ago, you'll see a lot of expressing frustration to accommodate for colorblindness for the sake of economic rationality. We are a minority. It's between 7 and 12% of men. So did accessibility options turn out to be profitable after all?
I think they are. There were some recent statistics on subtitles that Ubisoft explored, and they tried something recently. They tried putting subtitles on as a default. And they noticed that about 95% of their players in recent Assassin's Creeds leave them on. Like, people benefit from these. I saw a statistic, I think it was at GA Conf last year, that of people with physical disabilities, 68% of them play games regularly, because it's a thing they can do. Like, for anyone who moving around the world is harder, I would say it's a negligible impact to support colorblindness. To support blindness, and like total blindness, is an ambitious but approachable task.
Colorblind modes are usually divided up into 3 categories that are kind of extreme for the sake of simplicity. Deuteranopia for people who can't see green light, protanopia for people who can't see red light, and tritanopia for blue. But in reality, everyone's colorblindness is slightly different. It's not exactly an all-or-nothing situation like the name suggests. I'll get confused by certain shades of all 3 of those colors, but it's usually with the last 2 modes, protanopia and tritanopia, when things will start to look weird or just plain incorrect to me. So the Deuteranopia mode is what I'll usually stick with, but even then the results vary per game, with the general caveat being that the less the mode changes, the better. Developers, please, just stick to changing the colors of UI elements and other such strictly mechanical feedback, rather than attempting to change the whole screen's art for it. Remember that those of us who are colorblind, we've spent our entire lives seeing the world's beauty through this color palette, and we're appreciating it just fine. In my head, through my eyes, I'm not gonna care, let alone even be aware, if I'm not seeing the same environmental art that the game's artists are seeing. But when it comes time to crunch numbers and make decisions, that's when I'm gonna want to be on the same page as everyone else. The typical example of a modern game doing this wrong is Doom 2016, whose colorblind modes are more like colorblind simulators, or more like photo mode filters. The Deuteranopia option just turns the red planet green. It's not fooling me. This probably looks about as green to you guys as it does to me. Despite that, I don't remember Doom even really needing a colorblind mode. I started the game with it turned on, thought it looked weird and turned it off, and then completely forgot about it. Interestingly though, and what further supports the profitability of accessibility, is that these features end up getting utilized by the mainstream anyway, and boy is that satisfying. Esports pros swear up and down over a number of games that colorblind modes help improve spot times and reaction speeds, while at the same time those modes tend to be getting better and better for those of us who do genuinely need them. Battlefield's been the gold standard lately, ever since a controversy similar to Bioshock 2 hit Battlefield 3 in 2011. Apparently no one thought it would be weird to ship a game with bright orange bad guys versus bright green squad mates until it was out. It took them 9 months to issue a patch, but ever since then they've really been overcompensating. In Battlefield 4, this menu was a sight for actually sore eyes. 3 options for the 3 major types of colorblindness, with the menu reassuring you that it's just changing the UI and nothing else, with examples provided. And now, 8 years later, the latest Battlefields, they just let you straight up manually choose UI colors. There's not even any guesswork. So, you worked on Alien Isolation, right?
Indeed, yes.
What kind of consultation or tweaks did you employ from your colorblindness to make that one work?
I came onto the project with not too much time to go, like there was less than a year until release. However, I did have one colorblind issue in that game. There are the working Joes, the androids that go around, and their eyes are red when they are aggressive. But I couldn't see this red. It was this realization that started spurring me onto the idea of what was missing in development to make this stuff accessible. I had no idea that those eyes went red at all. I didn't know there was a feature in that place to denote visually that the androids were aggressive. The game was still technically playable because of it. There was just a guessing game with who you were hiding from. So I realized that there was a feature I was not aware of. And then the rest of the dev team was not aware of the problem. And so it was just a chance conversation I had with another tester on the project that enlightened me to the fact that, it's a color feature there and I can't see it. This is a problem. But this was too late in development to do something about it, or at least too late for me to convince anyone there was time to solve the problem. Everyone was just trying to ship the game. So that was when I realized, right, this has to be a campaign of information and understanding.
So that would have been 2014 going 2015, around when the push for accessibility options became a real initiative across the whole industry. In 2016, Overwatch shipped with the colorblind mode similar to Doom 2016's, which is more of a colorblind simulator. But after patches, you can do the Battlefield thing and choose your own UI colors. adjusting how they contrast for your monitor, your room, screenshots, videos, streams, even for the map. Whether you're colorblind or not, this stuff is useful. Titanfall 2 goes an even further mile, changing the lights on armor to adjust for colorblind modes. And Fortnite's colorblind options even have a vision test built right into the interface. And that stuff is exactly what I've been wanting, and I didn't even know I wanted it. Now that it's 2019, kids can find out what's wrong with themselves while fixing what's wrong with their games.